Chapter 4, Section 2, Children and Sharia. Given what Sharia means for women, it's no surprise that children fare no better. The same doctrines that restrict and endanger women also regulate childhood, from education and play to marriage and violence. A Catholic kindergarten in Italy took a group of 3 to 5-year-old children to a mosque where they were instructed to kneel, place their foreheads on the ground, and recite prayers facing Mecca. Invitations to participate are presented as an enriching cultural experience, but this masks the reality. These are not neutral activities, but acts of religious submission to Allah. Far from harmless fun, such visits initiate a process of soft indoctrination, introducing Islam not as a doctrine with legal, political, and moral consequences, but as something warm, inclusive, and benign. The effect is lasting. Children come away from these outings thinking they've learned something real about Islam, that it's familiar, that it's safe, and this false sense of understanding inoculates them against ever questioning it. And this is not an isolated incident. Across the Western world, similar events are repeated as Islamic doctrine quietly enters classrooms, cafeterias, and school policies under the umbrella of multiculturalism. Islamic doctrine as law, children as early adherents to Sharia. Islamic law places strict boundaries on what constitutes appropriate education for children. According to Reliance of the Traveler, a classic manual of Islamic law, ROT 3T316, the duty of guardian is limited to teaching the child Islamic behavior, including purification, prayer, and fasting. There is no doctrinal obligation to provide broader secular education or nurture critical thinking. The goal is obedience, not inquiry. According to Sharia, the ordained way of Islam, children are expected to begin observing the foundational practices of Islam at a young age. By age 7, children must begin praying and fasting. By age 10, if they do not comply, they are to be beaten. Adoption is forbidden, Quran 33:4-5, because Muhammad wanted to marry his adopted son's wife. Zayd did not seek divorce until it became clear that Muhammad desired her. Then a revelation declared that an adopted son is not a true son. This allowed the marriage and established a rule. Islamic law prioritizes blood lineage and inheritance, excluding non-Muslims entirely. And they must not take non-Muslim children as friends except as a pretense, Quran 3:28. The doctrine treats children not as developing individuals with autonomy, but as vessels for early indoctrination. Their highest purpose, according to foundational texts, is to serve the Ummah through strict obedience and ultimately through jihad, whether or not they oppose it. Quran 2:216. Fighting has been enjoined upon you while it is hateful to you, but perhaps you hate a thing and it is good for you, and perhaps you love a thing and it is bad for you, and Allah knows, while you know not. Even a child's name is not neutral in Islam. Naming is one of the earliest forms of conditioning. Islamic baby names, guides, often emphasize qualities like warrior, victorious, or servant of Allah, not simply as personal traits, but as markers of allegiance. From birth, children are taught that the world is divided into Muslims and enemies, with the non-Muslim, kafir, seen as an ever-present threat. The child learns that non-Muslims wish them harm, Quran 3:118, that they are unclean, Quran 9:28. This early identity programming instills fear and mistrust from infancy. Jihad and the child martyr ideal. Children are not exempt from jihad. In Gaza, even tiny children are trained to fight. During the annual Shia Ashura procession in places like New York, Toronto, Vancouver, London, Birmingham, babies are held in the air or carried as white bundles, signifying their sacrifice as future martyrs, sometimes with reenactments of the Battle of Karbala. In Victoria, British Columbia, Sheikh Jonas Kathrada, a Canadian imam, publicly praised child martyrs, calling them braver than others for their willingness to die for Islam. He concluded by cursing the Jews and calling for their destruction, directly from Islamic texts and teachings. Islamic eschatology reinforces this. The Hadith, Bukhari 29:26, predicts that Muslims will fight and kill Jews before the end times. This teaching has appeared in Saudi and Palestinian school books, in sermons, in madrasas, these are Islamic schools, where children are taught that this conflict is not only inevitable, but divinely ordained. In recent years, non-Muslim children have been stabbed and killed in non-Islamic countries in lone wolf attacks. One case involved a toddler fatally stabbed by an Afghan man in a German park. Another occurred in France. And then there were the Southport murders in the UK, a dance class full of little girls, 3 killed, 10 others stabbed, all traumatized. While each case must be examined on its own, it is important to realize that Islamic doctrine permits the killing of children if they are expected to grow up as disbelievers, as stated in Sahih Muslim 1812b, quote, so that you killed the prospective non-believer and left the prospective believer aside, unquote. This foundational precedent strips children of innocence if they are born outside of Islam. According to Islamic law, the expectation of future disbelief can justify their death. Yazidi women and children, victims of doctrinally sanctioned enslavement. On a larger scale, in 2014, thousands of Yazidi women and children were abducted in Iraq. These captives were subjected to systematic sexual slavery, with girls as young as 6 being raped and sold in markets. This horrific treatment was not merely a byproduct of war, but was justified by Islamic doctrine. The group cited Quran 4:24, which discusses the permissibility of sexual relations with those whom your right hands possess, to legitimize their actions. Additionally, Classic Manual of Islamic Law, Reliance of the Traveler 0913, outlines the distribution of war captives, further providing for such enslavement. Coptic Christians in Egypt, Hindus in India, Nigerian schoolgirls are routinely kidnapped, forced to convert, and trafficked into prostitution, often ending up in Saudi Arabia. In India, a man entered a family's building wearing a burqa and threw the woman who resisted him to her death. These kidnappings and coerced conversions are sometimes euphemistically described as love jihad. While the Yazidi tragedy unfolded in the heart of the Islamic world, the same doctrinal logic has taken root in Western countries, not through war, but through migration and legal appeasement, enabling the systematic grooming, rape, and trafficking of non-Muslim girls on non-Muslim soil. Grooming gangs, children as spoils of jihad. The grooming gang crisis in the UK, particularly in Rotherham, Rochdale, and Oxford, reflects the dark consequence of Islamic doctrine applied to non-Muslim children. Over decades, Muslim men, often of Pakistani origin, and in Holland of Moroccan origin, systematically abused, raped, and trafficked underage non-Muslim girls, while authorities, including the Rotherham police, either participated in the sexual abuse of these girls or remained silent for fear of being labeled racist or Islamophobic. This silence allowed the abuse to flourish. As detailed in Easy Meat by Peter McLaughlin, these crimes are rooted in a religious framework that treats non-Muslim women and children as legitimate spoils, the property of Muslims when Islam is dominant or advancing. Quran 4:24 permits sexual relations with captive women, and when applied today, it fuels the belief that non-Muslim girls are fair game and easily identified as such, unveiled and targeted. From Ibn Kathir, a commentary on Quran 33:59. Ibn Abbas said that Allah commanded the believing women when they went out of their houses for some need to cover their faces from above their heads with a jilbab, leaving only one eye showing. If they do that, it will be known that they are free women and that they are not servants or whores. This custom is enforced by morality police in some Islamic states, but also by individuals in non-Islamic states who regard it as Allah's law and not to be trifled with. Sharia legitimizes the enslavement and use of women and children captured in jihad. Reliance of the Traveler outlines how a caliph may distribute slaves taken in war, and under Islamic doctrine, war includes disbelief. From Ibn Kathir's commentary on Quran 5:33, quote, waging war against Allah and his messenger means to oppose or contradict, punishable by death or severe punishment, and it includes disbelief, unquote. These girls were not seen as equals, but as kafir, non-Muslims, outside the protection of Islamic law and open to exploitation. Convictions have been obtained for organizing and ongoing Islamic gang scandals right across Britain, including Rotherham, Rochdale, Telford, Oxford, Derby, Huddersfield, and Newcastle. In many cases, friends and family members joined in, underscoring a shared moral code regarding the treatment of non-Muslim girls, in which such acts were neither hidden nor shamed. The lack of outcry from the Islamic community itself is notable. In 2025, a Somali man in Minnesota was convicted of raping a 12-year-old girl. While she was playing alone in her yard, he forced her into his car, struck her on the head, and sexually assaulted her. His mosque submitted a letter to the sentencing judge, describing him as a deeply good man, facing the challenge of starting over in a new culture, despite him having lived in the country for 19 years. The letter, signed by the executive director of the Al-Azan Islamic Center, did not deny the rape, but even in the face of a child rape conviction, pleaded for leniency based on his service to the Muslim community. Quote, "And whoever covers the faults of a Muslim, Allah will cover his faults for him in the world and the hereafter, and Allah is engaged in helping the worshiper as long as the worshiper is engaged in helping his brother." From Tirmidhi, 1930. Education prioritizes doctrine. When girls were barred from attending school in Afghanistan, Western media was quick to assume this was a deviation from Islamic principles. But the doctrine tells a different story. Reliance of the traveler requires only that children be taught Islamic behavior, purification, prayer, fasting. There is no mandate for secular education. This is Sharia, especially not for girls whose very existence is viewed as a source of fitna, social or sexual disorder. Their primary role is defined as reproductive and domestic. Islamic authorities, including many imams and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, deny that this has anything to do with Islam, using careful doublespeak to mislead Western audiences. It is true the Quran says nothing about banning girls from school, but this silence is not incidental. The absence of any doctrinal support for secular learning, combined with texts that assign girls a limited domestic function, is what permits and sustains their exclusion. Millions of girls remain locked out of classrooms. Child abuse hidden in doctrine. Islamic doctrine sanctions practices that pose grave risks to children. Female genital mutilation, justified by Hadith, Quran 30:30, and Dawood 52:71. FGM is most prevalent in Muslim populations and has spread to the West via migration. First cousin marriage, doctrinally permissible. It is linked to elevated rates of stillbirth, disability, and mental impairment, especially in the UK amongst Pakistani Muslims. All children are born Muslim. The belief that no child is born except al-fitra, Islam, this is from Quran 30:30, underpins the justification for indoctrinating children, whether they're Muslim or not, into Islamic beliefs, whether through school visits to mosques or public accommodation of Sharia practices. This belief similarly justifies the killing of apostates who have reached puberty. Children who rebel against Islam, even though they had no choice in their original designation as Muslims. Honor killings. Familial violence against disobedient children is justified by Sharia principles that permit parents and grandparents to kill children without penalty. The Quran, 1880-81, tells the story of a boy who was killed for fear he would grow up defiant, and Reliance of the Traveler explicitly states there is no expiation for killing one's own child or grandchild, unquote. Western institutions contribute to this encroachment on basic human rights when they exempt Muslim children from core school activities such as swimming. This is a safety issue, or music lessons. In Iraq, a 15-year-old boy was beheaded for listening to Western music. Child marriage. There is no lower age limit for marriage in Islamic law. Girls may be married off by their male guardians at any age and to whoever they choose, including old men. Muhammad himself married Aisha when he was 54 and she was only 6. European educators report that girls age 14 or 15 are sometimes married by force to older men at the mosque or taken abroad during holidays and returned married. According to one educator, quote, "They're not being treated equally before the law as they should be." He added that politicians don't know the doctrine. They think it's just culture, and warned, quote, "The rights of women gained over the last 50 years will flow away like water." narrated Aisha that the Prophet married her when she was 6 years old, and he consummated his marriage when she was 9 years old. Hisham wrote, I have been informed that Aisha remained with the Prophet for 9 years till his death, Bukhari 51:34. Following the example of Muhammad in the teaching of the Quran, a girl can be both married and divorced before reaching puberty, Quran 65:4. Girls must be veiled, supervised, and their childhood joy, including dancing, singing, and open laughter, is discouraged or forbidden. If there is only one chair and she is on it, she must get off and give it to her brother. Their role is submission, not play. Deception and cultural entrapment in Western schools. Western children are being conditioned to view Islam as just another religion, even a fashionable or exotic one. In classrooms, hijabs are celebrated as cultural symbols through events and readings circumventing secular restrictions against religious promotion and public education. But in the courtroom, the same garment is defended as a religious right. Schools serve halal meals to all students to avoid kitchen complications. Non-Muslim students are encouraged to fast during Ramadan to support their peers. What begins as an inclusive gesture becomes indoctrination by stealth, normalizing the demands of Sharia without ever explaining to children how far those demands can go once Sharia has the upper hand, Quran 47:35. A Hindu man once told me how at 5 years old in Bangladesh, he hid in a closet as Muslim men dragged his 16-year-old sister from their home. She was never seen again. That is what it looks like when Sharia has the upper hand. But stories such as this are never shared with Western school children. Sharia is not introduced all at once. It is introduced in stages. Across the EU, the UK, Canada, and the US, children are being exposed to Dawah, the outreach mission of Islam, at an age when impressions are deep and critical thinking undeveloped. This topic is discussed more thoroughly in a later chapter. The effect is to make them more susceptible to later influence. In some Western classrooms, students have been pressured into public conversions, surrounded by Muslim peers who act as both witnesses and reinforcers. These strategies are embedded in curriculum decisions, approved by advisors who are either ideologically motivated, complicit, or dangerously naive. Once conditioned to submit in symbolic ways, these same children will receive instructions. Now you must eat halal. Now you must wear the hijab. A doctrine of subjugation. Islam is not a faith that merely coexists. It is a system of governance, a complete model for society, and it demands submission. The Quran 9:29 instructs Muslims to fight non-Muslims until they submit, pay the jizya, and feel themselves subdued. This is applied wherever Islam is strong enough to enforce it. While Western children are being groomed to see Islam as peaceful and tolerant, Muslim children in Islamic societies are being trained to obey, to fight, and to die. The contrast could not be starker. Final word, a duty to protect. Children are being used, Muslim and non-Muslim alike. In the Islamic world, they are weaponized. In the West, they are softened up. But in both cases, the mechanism is the same. Sharia. Islamic doctrine demands conformity, and it begins with the youngest and most vulnerable. The West has laws to protect children. Abuse and neglect of children is not only a crime, there is a duty to report. And yet, despite laws banning practices like female genital mutilation, some Western countries, including Canada, have never secured a single conviction.